So to start off, Zach, maybe tell everyone what Lupio does.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Alex. First of all, I feel like a bit of an imposter. Put me up here after John and Arthi, but I'll try my best. So hi, everyone. Exciting to be back, an in-person event, shaking off some nerves. So Lupio, what we do, you did a great job, by the way. We are RFP response software. So I know that's a mouthful, but basically we help sales teams manage content, build proposals, respond to RFPs, and just deploy their best content to accelerate sales cycles, win more. We are been around for about 7 or 8 years. We're about 200 people, about 1,100 customers around the world, north of 20 million in ARR. So it's been quite the journey, Alex.
So you started 8 years ago, and before that you were at Achievers for several years. So a couple questions. Where did you meet your co-founders, and how did Achievers impact what you decided to do with Lupio?
Great question. So I have 2 co-founders. One of them was working with me at Achievers. We were both on an engineering team together, and the other one, Jafar, him and I went to school together. So we were engineering classmates, met in Frosh Week, always dreamt that one day we would start a business together. It took another 10-ish years before anything manifested, but personal relationships were first. And then as far as Achievers, I was also there for 8 years, a company that grew from 20 to 200 people over the course of that time. I know there's some other Achievers alumni in the audience here. So I think that company taught me about the challenges of scale and like what happens at every stage of growth, but it also taught me about the importance of culture. We built employee engagement software. So we were selling amazing workplace culture. That was what our technology did. And so living and breathing that for 8 years, the importance of recognition, hiring great talent, selling into HR, I think it just gave me this like backbone of culture and the importance of culture in business.
So you were at Achievers for 8 years. You knew you wanted to start something with Jafar. What was the impetus to start Lupio? How did you know this was an idea you wanted to pursue? Tell us where the idea came from.
Yeah, so you don't wake up, dreaming of RFP response software. It's not something that, you want to tell your friends about. But I got to spend 2 years working as a sales engineer at my time at Achievers. And so when we were selling to large companies, a lot of what we had to do was responding to complex questionnaires. And so that's when the idea started. Like most entrepreneurial stories, you feel a problem, you feel the pain, and then you want to do something about it. And so that led to some more conversations, which led to some more conversations, and eventually we took the leap.
And when you took that leap, you did something very different than I see in this ecosystem. You decided to bootstrap. You didn't go raise money. What was your thinking behind that?
Any other bootstrap founders in the crowd? Can you give them a round of applause because they need it? So bootstrapping, for those who aren't familiar, it's really pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, self-funding, or taking no capital, funding based on just on revenue from customers. And so we didn't start that way, Alex. In the beginning, it was we know that the 3 of us, we could at least get the software platform off the ground, and we could start having conversations. And that's like the value of being in the industry for 10 years. You have a network around you. Then as we started to get momentum in the early days, we decided, hey, let's bootstrap this thing, maintain control of the company, really build that discipline and that muscle, and then we'll raise money when the time is right. That was kind of how the early days worked.
So tell us more about the decision and how that impacted your early days, because it's your money. You can't really burn capital. So what trade-offs did you have to make in the early days?
Yeah, so when you're bootstrapped, you can't do everything that you want to do, but I think the discipline that you can gain is extremely valuable. So number one, customer centricity. Like when you are a bootstrap, like you are obsessed with your customers because you know the value of every single customer relationship. So I think that's number one. You get really good at thinking about ROI, making trade-offs. Like if I have $1, where do I put it? And I think that builds a really strong foundation. And then I think you just get better at decision making. And I'm not mandating that every company should be bootstrapped. In fact, if I had to found another company again one day, I may not bootstrap it. Every situation is different. You got to think about the stage of life of the founding team because You're not going to pay yourself a big salary in the early days if you're bootstrap. You got to think about the market, the competitive landscape. There's a lot of different factors that go into it, but it made us a very data-driven, customer-centric business in the early days.
And in those early days, how did you know Lupio was working?
How did we know Lupio was working? People are paying you money. That's how you know it's working. But yeah, that was basically it. It's as soon as you have, there was a book that we read early days called Lean B2B, and I remember this quote from that book that like always stuck with me that said, as soon as you have like 5 raving fans that are paying you money, you have enough product market fit. So just focus on that. So as soon as we got those like 5 or 6 customer reviews online from paying customers, like I knew there was something. And then you just keep chipping away at it.
So you got the product market fit, you had those raving customers, you were disciplined, and then next thing I know, I'm reading about this $9 million round led by OpenView. So tell us about what the decision-making process, why OpenView, why go from bootstrap to venture capital?
Yeah, so I think Arthi talked about this idea of like just always understanding where you want to go, whether it's your personal life or professional life, and I think this was a big thing for us is when we started Lupio, we knew we wanted to build a great company, an enduring company, and we knew that the day might come where we raise money and it made sense. And so for even 2 years before that Series A, I had probably had conversations with about 50 VCs, and the conversation was always like, hey, we're not raising, but here's what we're working on, let me know what you think. And that makes you more attractive for the founders out there to venture capitalists when you don't want the money. And you're growing. And so the time came where it was a combination of like, we knew exactly what we would do with the money. The competitive landscape was heating up a little bit too much, and we wanted to kind of keep our market position. And then we just felt we were at that kind of Series A stage, like 3 million in ARR. We had the metrics. Timing felt right. Timing felt right.
And so you started conversations 2 years before you raised. So play hard to get is what I'm hearing here. But then how'd you choose your partner here? Like, I'm sure you had a bunch of different options.
They chose us. So they got really aggressive. We were a couple weeks out from starting a process that we wanted to do, and they just put forward a really compelling offer. We had built up 6 months of a good relationship with OpenView before they invested, and we knew it was the right partner. We were able to negotiate good terms, and we just wanted to get back to work.
And what was the promise to each other? So when you get investment from an outsider, there's an implicit or explicit promise with what you're going to do with the money, what the returns are going to be, how you're going to work with those investors. So what was the deal with OpenView?
So I do think our situation was different, and I think this again speaks to the value of if you can bootstrap a company to a certain scale, I think you can dictate a little bit more of the terms and the pace. And the conversations were like, when I was talking to Ricky, our investment partner, was like, what do you think success looks like 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Like, what kind of return do you want to deliver for Lupio? And I think just being able to ask those questions early in advance anchored me a little bit more to what financial outcome we were looking to drive. But Ricky, again, an investor is about so much more than the money, right? It was about picking the right partner, and Ricky and I were very aligned on just values, keeping culture strong, staying somewhat efficient. We knew that this could be the only round of venture we ever raised, and we had that conversation in the early days. So we knew that we wanted to keep this business a fairly efficient business going forward, and so those were the upfront conversations. But it's very important to be aligned. A lot of people don't do it, that kind of alignment in the early days.
So it sounds like you're not a fan of the current environment where investors and founders meet and then 2 days later is a term sheet.
It's just, you kind of have to play to the times, right? And I think it's cost benefit. At the end of the day, the benefit for founders right now to move quickly is that you can get an extreme, huge, mega round of money with doing very little. But if that's going to give you the right outcome, so it's not the way that I necessarily think about the world, but I understand it.
And then tell us, how did the company change from a culture, from a growth perspective once you took that venture capital money? I think you're at 3 million ARR. You've now got outside investors. Was it the same company? Was it different?
Yeah. So I think this is actually a really good point of for bootstrap founders that are thinking of raising money one day, I didn't expect this was going to be a big thing, but it ended up in reflection being a lot bigger is the injection of confidence and then the brand that kind of comes along with it. So being able to just be bolder and take bigger bets, get your team excited about the future. Nothing does that better than kind of a big round of financing. And then being able to send a really strong message to the market. I just remember the caliber of people that I was able to surround myself with almost instantly after that round just was like a step function increase. And so it was about so much more than the money, right? I think that was the key thing looking back at that time.
So now let's flash forward to this April. You announced, so you do bootstrap, a 9 million round, then was a 200 million USD or $250 million round with private equity backing this April. So, and you went from venture capital to private equity. So explain to us what happened this April. What was the money? What did it mean?
Yeah, I'm just trying to hit for the cycle, right? Have every single type of investor. So yeah, it was a 200 million US round from a private equity, Sumeru Equity Partners out of California. So again, this goes back to like what we always thought was success and what we were looking for. And we kind of reached a juncture where we had one founder that was no longer operating in the business. We had an investor that we had reached the size where they were going to hit their return threshold. And for those of you that haven't really explored that private equity world, I would say right now is a really interesting time because for us, we were able to have our cake and eat it too. We were old shareholders were able to be bought out. We were able to provide liquidity to employees, stock option holders, and we were able to put money into the bank account to fuel growth at a very good valuation. And again, I think it's a product of the market and our momentum over the last few quarters. And I knew I wanted to keep building Lupio for the next however many years and build a really big company. And so this just allowed us to do all those things at the same time. But I think the thing that private equity made sense about was we were still a very efficient growth company, which private equity investors love.
So I got to ask about the private equity investors that were at the table. John talked that there's not a lot of people that can write a $100 million check in this country. Did you have any Canadian investors at the table?
We had a couple that were in kind of our conversations, yes, but it was large majority of the conversations were south of the border.
And what's the difference for people that don't know here with a private equity investor versus a venture capital investor? How are they thinking different? What are they expecting from you?
So private equity, venture, and I'm not an investor, so if I'm getting anything wrong here, please forgive me. And then you also throw growth equity in the mix, right? So generally speaking, on the venture side, more aggressive, looking for a bigger return, higher risk, more, typically more cash burn. On the private equity side, generally later stage, investors take a larger stake in the company, more efficient growth and lower expectations of maybe what the return outcome could be, but still looking to build a really big business. So more emphasis on efficiency and effectiveness. But Alex, I would say over the last few years, one thing I've noticed, and again, over the last few years, I've met 50, 100 different investors in growth equity, private equity, is that flexible capital is the word I'm hearing all the time, right? Oh, we'll take minority, majority stake. We'll do, pure equity around or we'll do something else. And I think there's just a lot of money out there and people just want to partner with great companies. And what I've seen in the investor community over the last few years is just a lot more flexibility in valuations, deployment of capital, all of those different things. And so I almost see the worlds kind of coming together between private equity, growth equity, venture.
So bootstrap, you have one culture, a set of employees. Venture capital, it sounds like you got a different set of employees, a bit different culture. What's the impact on private equity? It's been a few months, not many, but do you see changes happening already?
I just want to emphasize, putting all of private equity under one blanket, I think is dangerous. What I've noticed over the last few months in meeting so many investors that they're all different. But the difference I've noticed in working with a different stage of investor is just more focus on different metrics. I would say early stage venture, all you care about is net growth and net cash burn, and everything else in the middle doesn't matter. Now I'm seeing a lot more focus on other metrics and KPIs, but overall, we haven't really changed much, to be honest. They wanted to get on our ship, not the other way around, right? When something's going well, they don't want to do harm, right? That's the number one rule.
So I want to go back to one other thing John said. He talked about the economic multiplier. of having success. You talked there was a secondary. So how did this impact your employees? How did this impact Toronto?
I honestly, so it's a great question. So Alex is asking about providing cash out for employees, and this is not something we've spoken to openly about before, but I know you and I chatted about this a bit earlier. I would say for founders out there, rewarding your employees through equity and actually paying out when you can is extremely motivating. It's giving back to the community. It's producing the next wave of founders, and if anything, it builds more loyalty. And you know what? If there's certain people that have been here on your ship for 5 years, 7 years, and it's time for them, and they think you're worried that they'll leave after you cash out some stock options, it might be the right time for them and for you. And so I think what I can tell you now is everybody that's on the ship, on the company, is dialed in, is motivated, is ready for the next 5 years. So my advice to founders is lean more on giving back to your employees when you have those moments, because they don't come around too often.
And looking forward 5 years, where is Lupio? What's your vision? What's your
Honestly, we're just trying to build a really big, great, enduring company, and we're going to be more global. Fast forward a few years, we're going to dominate our category. There's still RFP response software and sales enablement. What we're doing is still 80% greenfield. So we just want to be at the forefront of that. We want to build a really big Canadian brand with a lot of success stories, and nothing would make me happier than producing more founders for this ecosystem.
And then, yeah, let's hear some claps for that. One final question, Zach. For any founder that's looking at raising money for the first time, you've said you've gone through bootstrapping, venture capital, private equity. What's the one tip or one thing they shouldn't forget?
For raising capital in general? And this, I think some of our other panelists talked about this. It's don't be afraid to be bold. So that's a combination of moving quickly and having a big, bold vision, and making yourself a little bit uncomfortable. I think in general, if I think about all the different collective experiences, that's usually been, and do whatever, surround yourself with whoever you need to, whether it's other founders, advisors, whatever, that's going to give you that courage. But yeah, be bold and move fast, because when you see a window, we did this process for this $200 million round, it really happened in 6 weeks. It was fast. And so when lightning strikes and you see that moment, don't be afraid to be bold, and don't be afraid to move quickly.
I lied. I have one more question based on that answer. So you said be bold, but surround yourself with people that make you bold. How do you find those people?
Well, you come out to great events like TechTO, right? You meet other founders. I would say advisors can go a really long way, right? Find founders that have 5 years ahead of you and learn from them. But yeah, I would say that one thing that's amazing about the technology community, especially the Toronto tech community, is just how accessible everyone is. And as a founder, nothing is more energizing than helping another founder. So just remember that if you're ever reaching out to another founder and you want help, chances are that founder wants to help you. They legitimately will go out of their way to take that call. So that's what I would say about that.
Thank you, Zach. Can I get a round of applause for Zach? Thanks so much. And I have a feeling tomorrow you're going to get a bunch of emails, Zach, about asking for help.